Sometimes, the biggest revolutions in sport don't begin with a superstar, a championship final, or a dramatic last-minute victory. Sometimes, they begin with a simple idea that nobody else was brave enough to try. That is exactly what happened when the Springboks, under the leadership of Rassie Erasmus, introduced one of the most controversial and fascinating tactics modern rugby has ever seen. What looked like an unusual midfield maul was far more than a clever attacking move. It was a carefully planned message to the entire rugby world, a statement that challenged the way the game was being officiated and questioned whether one of rugby's greatest traditions was slowly disappearing. When South Africa first unveiled the tactic against Italy during the 2024 Test Series, confusion spread almost instantly. Fans watching from home paused in disbelief. Commentators struggled to explain what they were seeing. Even experienced players looked uncertain about how to defend it. Within moments, social media exploded with debates. Some called it pure genius. Others described it as bending the laws of the game. But while everyone argued about whether it should be allowed, the Springboks quietly celebrated the only thing that truly mattered: they scored. Not once, but twice. The experiment had delivered exactly what it was designed to do. Yet the most remarkable part of the story wasn't what happened on the field. It was where the idea came from. Instead of copying another international powerhouse, the inspiration came from a viral clip featuring Paul Roos under 14 team. While most people watched the video for entertainment, Rassie Erasmus and his coaching staff saw something completely different. They saw possibility. They studied every movement, imagined how it could work at test level, refined the concept through countless training sessions, and eventually transformed a schoolboy idea into an international rugby weapon. It was another reminder that innovation doesn't always come from experience. Sometimes it comes from seeing opportunity where everyone else sees nothing. For Rassie Erasmus, however, this was never just about catching opponents by surprise. The tactic had a much deeper purpose. According to him, the traditional driving maul, one of rugby's oldest and most iconic attacking weapons, was slowly losing its effectiveness because of the way matches were being refereed. Instead of becoming contests of controlled power, many mauls had turned into messy battles where defenders could disrupt them by dragging players, attacking from awkward angles, or breaking their momentum before they ever became dangerous. The Springboks believed the game was drifting away from one of its defining features, and rather than simply complaining, they decided to demonstrate the problem in the most powerful way possible. As Erasmus later explained, if teams could no longer rely on building strong mauls directly from lineouts, then perhaps the answer was to create them somewhere completely unexpected. A midfield maul forced defenders into unfamiliar situations. It removed many of the predictable defensive patterns teams had developed over the years and created uncertainty in a part of the field where nobody expected such a contest to take place. Suddenly, the Springboks weren't just attacking their opponents, they were challenging rugby's tactical assumptions. Of course, elite sport never stands still for long. Once rival nations had studied the footage, they began preparing specific plans to stop the innovation. Teams like Australia and New Zealand adjusted their defensive structures, making the tactic far less surprising than it had been during its unforgettable debut against Italy. The easy tries disappeared, but the importance of the move never faded. In many ways, forcing the world's best teams to redesign their defensive systems was already proof that the idea had changed the game. This wasn't the first time the Springboks had rewritten rugby's tactical playbook. During the 2019 Rugby World Cup final against England, South Africa produced a brilliantly executed maul that won a crucial penalty in one of the biggest matches the sport has ever seen. Years later, they introduced another creative line-out variation against Australia, famously nicknamed the Twin Towers, where unexpected movement between jumpers completely disrupted the defensive line. Every few seasons, the Springboks seem to unveil something the rugby world has never witnessed before. That isn't luck. It's the result of a coaching philosophy built on constant curiosity, relentless preparation, and the courage to challenge conventional thinking. As discussions surrounding the midfield maul grew louder, attention eventually shifted beyond coaches and players. Referees, former internationals, analysts, and fans all began debating whether the tactic exposed weaknesses in the laws themselves. The conversation became so significant that World Rugby reviewed the way mauls were being officiated. New law application guidelines were later introduced, clarifying how players should legally join a maul, where they must bind, and how defenders should avoid illegally pulling or dragging opponents instead of driving through the contest. The updated guidance aimed to restore fairness while protecting one of rugby's most important phases of play. Whether those changes happened because of the Springboks innovation or simply accelerated discussions that were already taking place may never be fully agreed upon. But one fact is impossible to ignore. South Africa forced the rugby world to have a conversation it could no longer avoid. Instead of accepting the game as it was, they challenged everyone to think about what it should become. That willingness to question established ideas has become one of Rassie Erasmus' greatest strengths. While many coaches spend their time perfecting familiar systems, he constantly searches for opportunities hidden inside the smallest details. He understands that in modern international rugby, the difference between victory and defeat is often measured in tiny margins. A single innovative tactic, a fresh perspective, or an unexpected decision can completely change the outcome of a test match. Perhaps that is why the Springboks continue to stay ahead of so many of their rivals. They don't simply react to how rugby evolves, they help shape its future. Every new tactic forces opponents to spend valuable time studying South Africa instead of improving their own game. Every innovation creates fresh questions that defenders must answer under enormous pressure. Even when a move stops producing spectacular tries, its influence often lives on because it changes how teams prepare, train, and think. In the end, the midfield maul represents something much bigger than a clever piece of strategy. It represents a mindset, a belief that success belongs to those willing to challenge accepted ideas instead of following them. It proves that true champions don't wait for change, they create it. And as long as Rassie Erasmus continues leading the Springboks, rugby fans everywhere can expect one thing above all else. Just when the rest of the world believes it has seen everything, South Africa will almost certainly unveil another innovation that nobody saw coming, once again reminding everyone why they remain one of the most fascinating and unpredictable teams in World Rugby. Sometimes, the biggest